one. Mookie Magic. Dodgers have won it all. High fly ball into right field. She is gone. He struck him out. 2 balls and a strike to count on Taylor. Reyes fires, swinging a drive, deep left field. It's his way back. Walk him off. Chris Taylor.
Hi, everyone, and welcome into DodgerHeads Live, presented by DodgerBlue.com. Daniel and I have the honor of doing the first sort of official World Series show of the year. And of course, we're here to discuss the Dodgers World Series roster, which, Daniel, a lot of excitement this morning. Things seem to be trending in the right direction. Alex Vesia is probably coming back. He is back. We're going to get into that. And then you see, oh, wait a minute, Evan Phillips is not active for the World Series.
Yeah, it feels like we got hit with one of his wipeout sweepers, like just kind of came out of nowhere this morning. Obviously, super unfortunate. Evan Phillips is like probably him and Blake Treinen are 1A and 1B as far as the most important relievers in the bullpen and like guys you want in those big spots, especially when you're talking about this series going up against, Judge and Stanton and whatnot. So huge loss, cannot be overstated. Like you said, it is good to get those other guys back, Vesia and Graterol and Rojas, which we'll get into, but definitely a stunner and not something we expected, even though I guess some reporters are coming out and saying that, he was dealing with a little dead arm in his last outing and whatnot. But I don't think any of us expected him to not be on the roster. So definitely a big blow.
Yeah, so thinking back, I remember, if we need to, with Evan Phillips, we have to trace it back to Game 6 of the NLCS when the Dodgers did their bullpen game. And, I know we were all texting as a staff trying to figure out, okay, as it's getting later, like, how are they going to do this? Because they were running short on options and they were still, I think, 12 outs to get or something like that. And for Phillips to only go the 1 inning was a surprise at the time, especially with it ending with Blake Treinen needing to get a 6-out save. Now, I'm pretty sure Phillips disclosed to some of the reporters in the club during the clubhouse celebration after the NLCS that he had a little bit of arm fatigue. It was brought up again during World Series Media Day, but throughout that entire time, and if I'm remembering correctly, that it did first get reported while the Dodgers clinched the pennant. And even yesterday, certainly yesterday, there wasn't any indication that there was trouble. Phillips himself downplayed, having any concern. So yeah, I mean, this is, certainly a surprise. And you and I, as before we came on, we sort of not joked, but mentioned that there's always something with the Dodgers playoff roster, always some sort of surprise. Unfortunately, it's now not to necessarily compare the two. I know Joe Kelly had an inconsistent season, but Joe Kelly was left off the NLDS roster because of an injury he suffered during the bye week. Now Evan Phillips isn't available because he's having some shoulder trouble. And Dave Roberts and Andrew Friedman are both scheduled to speak later today. So I think as much as the focus is on the now, and understandably so, at least for me, there is a little bit of concern. I hope that it's just sort of, dead arm, if you will, and not necessarily anything going on in the shoulder, because if you're looking at surgery where we're at in the calendar, then, the 2025 season could be at risk.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Of course, we're focused on the World Series right now, and that's a big loss for this series coming up. But like you said, if he does, need a surgery or whatever and miss his all of next season, you're going to be without your best reliever there. And, we know there are a lot of kind of aging guys in the Dodger bullpen, so who knows who will be back or not. But, we'll talk about all that at a later time. We could focus on this series right now. And, it's going to put a lot of pressure on all the other high leverage relievers. And we were talking about this before too, whenever they have that bullpen game, it's going to put pressure on the low leverage guys as well, because they're going to need to eat more innings. So, we know this bullpen is stocked with dudes who have come up big time and time again, but to lose a piece as important as Phillips, it's a really big loss. And I know, there are, like I was saying, there are still other guys like Michael Kopech, Blake Treinen, Daniel Hudson. They're getting Brusdar Graterol back, but he hasn't pitched all season really. So that's a tough spot to put him in if you're saying, hey, here's the 7th inning with the heart of the order coming up in a 1-run game, for a guy who's made 2 outings all season. So it's unfortunate. I guess in theory, maybe if there's an injury, he could be added to the roster, in the middle of the series if he's feeling up to it. But I feel like if if they felt that he wasn't healthy enough to even be on the roster, like chances of him being better like in a week or 5 days or whatever is probably pretty slim.
Yeah, and I do see Eric's asking, could it be they give Graterol / another reliever a try, and if no bueno, they use an injury to bring Phillips back. This way, they get a quote extra roster spot and let Phillips rest / not take up a roster spot since he was down playing. Yeah, like you said, and like Eric said, like sure, maybe that's a possibility. Although at this point, it's the World Series. Like I would be inclined, the Dodgers aren't necessarily going to be not with somebody like Evan Phillips. And before you and I came on, I joked with you, like Dave Roberts made a strange comment when he was asked about Joe Kelly being on the World Series roster. He said no, like not at the beginning, but if we need to make a change later, he could be an option. I thought that's kind of a weird comment to say, like you're already kind of sort of planning on an injury. And it gets tricky with injury replacements for during the playoffs because that stuff is fully vetted. Like you're not going to trick MLB needs to independently approve it. Now, my guess is Brusdar Graterol, even though he is back, we're going to get to him in a minute. He probably, still has a little bit of inflammation in his shoulder, right? So theoretically, if he pitches in a couple games and then his shoulder is bothering him again, that's probably an easy swap. But again, like with I could see that maybe with Joe Kelly. With Evan Phillips, I would be shocked unless it is like truly a scenario where, hey, he just needs 2 or 3 more days for some reason. And come game 3, like if we've used somebody a couple times, we could do an injury replace. But again, like that type of roster manipulation it can happen during the regular season. I think doing it in the playoffs when MLB has to approve everything and really goes through it with a fine tooth comb, I would be a little bit more hard pressed to believe that would end up being the case. But let's get to some of the guys that are added onto the roster. We mentioned Brusdar Graterol, Miguel Rojas, Alex Vesia, also back. Things were certainly, if you guys had been reading DodgerBlue.com and watching the videos we've been putting up, things were pointing in this direction. I think most confidence lied with Vesia and Rojas returning. Graterol seemed to be a little bit of a wild card. And maybe they're pushing the envelope with Graterol a little bit because of Phillips' injury. That's just me sort of like speculating and connecting some dots. There's nothing that's indicated as much, but let's discuss Graterol. Obviously, he's certainly valuable in any regard. Even if Phillips was around, but with Phillips out, is he suddenly is going to be thrust into I would imagine high leverage situations, even though he hasn't really pitched a whole lot this year.
Yeah, and that's a tough spot to be in. Like you said, he hasn't really pitched. Like he came back for, I think it was just one outing, and then he hurt his hamstring or whatever it was, and what has been out again ever since. So it's really tough to not have any sort of outings under your belt and then just go straight into the World Series where you're against like one of the best lineups in baseball. Obviously, we know what the harder their lineup has, like with Judge and Stanton and Soto and all them. So like I guess like in the sense that if you lose Phillips, it is good to have Graterol, who in the past has been a high leverage guy for this team. And if he's healthy, like the velocity is what you want in October. Like he doesn't necessarily miss a ton of bats, but he does get a lot of soft contact. And in theory, he can give you 2 innings if need be, like if he has a quick first inning, so he can cover multiple if you need it. But it's just hard to know like what he's going to be. Like, is he going to be the best version of himself, or is he going to be, the worst version of himself? Like who really knows? And that's, when you're in the World Series, you don't necessarily want to take that gamble, which is why I don't think back to that last comment, like I don't think it's a case of let's give Graterol a try, and then if not, we'll bring Phillips back. Like I think that's too risky. Like, just because the margin for error is very slim in this series. So hoping for the best. Like if Graterol is on, he's another weapon to add to that bullpen and definitely helps make up for the loss of Evan Phillips. It's just such a question mark that we really just don't know what we're going to get from him.
Yeah, and part of me, obviously the Dodgers are going to do at least one bullpen game this series. My guess is it would be in game 4. That way they can sort of minimize its usage in that regard, not like the NLCS where because of how the schedule lined up, they had to use 2 bullpen games. Part of me wonders, does Graterol become like an opener for that bullpen game as much as, maybe you use him tonight in game 1 in some sort of, medium to high leverage spot, maybe medium leverage ideally because it is his first game back in a while. get that under his belt, and then maybe he's your opener for the bullpen game, because we did see Ryan Brazier did well against the Padres in that role and during the regular season, but then his last 2 times weren't as great. Or just was it the one time? Yeah, just the one.
Yeah, it was Kopech in the game
Right.
6 who was the opener.
That's right, Kopech. So Brazier kind of struggled in that role. They went to Kopech. Kopech, whether it was adrenaline or whatever you might want to call it, like he also didn't necessarily shine. Graterol is somebody that they have used as an opener, so maybe he fills in that way as well to kind of help. Of course, that then means Brazier is being used theoretically later in the game, which, if that's good or bad, like we'll have to wait and see. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they sort of handle Graterol. And the other thing too is, at least, the last update we got from Dave Roberts was that Graterol, it wasn't clear if he's faced batters yet, which I'm inclined to believe he probably has at least once, because it would be odd to bring him back if he didn't.
Yeah.
But when Dave was discussing Vesia and Graterol potentially being on the roster, he did say Vesia threw 15 pitches in a simulated game, and he said Graterol was going to be throwing a bullpen session, I believe, on Wednesday. And so, like, if he hasn't faced any hitters at all, like, that just adds another wrinkle to this. But hey, it's the World Series at this point. You kind of, sort of figure it out as you go. I did see Hawaiian Kira make some reference to just, Dodgers have faced adversity all season long. Finished with the best record in baseball, overcame a 2-1 deficit in the NLDS, got through the NLCS with, punting 2 games. And so, I guess we shouldn't have expected anything otherwise. And if there's a team that I think that can do it, it's this one.
Yeah, and before we move on to Vesia, who I think is the real big addition here, I think you made a good point about using Graterol as an opener. He has done that in the past, and I do think, with the loss of Evan Phillips, you want to have like someone like Michael Kopech and even Ryan Brazier, like to be used in more leverage spots as opposed to being an opener. Like someone in that bullpen is going to have to take on the Evan Phillips role, and if you're able to use Graterol as an opener and get 1 or 2 innings out of him, that would kind of help set up, the rest of the bullpen with guys you trust more, as opposed to someone like you said who maybe hasn't even faced, live hitters since however long it's been with him.
Yeah, late September for Graterol.
Okay.
Sticking in the bullpen, you mentioned Alex Vesia. I think he's the one that most people were hoping the Dodgers would get back, obviously with Juan Soto being in the Yankees lineup, and just Vesia's versatility, success, experience, all the above. You mentioned he's the biggest addition of the 3 that have been added onto the roster from the NLCS. What do you do you think do you think Vesia's role changes at all with Phillips being out? Do you think they look at him to maybe face, I know with the 3-batter minimum it changed anyway, but will he get kind of more of the, Yankees right-handed hitters than the Dodgers might have been initially planning on?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. We'll see how healthy he is. I do think this is kind of the last series here, so you could empty the tank, as they say. Like, you don't necessarily need to, hold anything back. But I do think Vesia is going to be hugely important to this series. Like, we know the Soto matchup, of course, and the Dodgers don't have, outside of Anthony Bonda, they don't have any other lefties on the roster. So it's like if you're using Bonda in the 5th or 6th inning to go get Soto, someone's going to have to get him, later in the late innings, especially if it's a close game. So having Vesia back is huge. And I think the Yankees as a whole have struggled against left-handed pitching, and they've absolutely mashed right-handed pitching. So having Vesia, who was, a top 5 lefty reliever in baseball this year, will be huge. Like you said, they might need him to, obviously he's going to come in to face, Soto, but he might have to get some, Judge and Stanton and Rizzo and all. Like they might need him to face 5 or 6 hitters in some of these outings. And I think as long as he's healthy, he's a great guy to have. So I think, like, as big of a loss as Phillips is, like, the addition of Vesia is just as big on the positive side. And of course you would love to have, both of those guys, but I guess it is a little silver lining. Like, hey, we don't have, Evan Phillips, but at least we are getting Alex Vesia back for this series.
Yeah, let's pause this really quick. We have a super chat from Hank. It says, if Nestor is willing to pitch for a shot at a ring and risk injury, Robert should let Gonsolin and Ohtani pitch. I mean, I can sort of understand the sentiment. I think that these scenarios are a lot different. One, Nestor, with Tony Gonsolin specifically, he hasn't pitched all year. And so to put him in a World Series situation, or even the playoffs, if he had been back for the NLDS or NLCS, for that to be his first time. I mean, we're discussing the challenges and difficulty of Brusdar Graterol being thrust into facing hitters after not necessarily doing so for maybe a month. Tony Gonsolin going a full year basically without any game action, and then that coming in the playoffs. I don't think that that's something that you want to risk. 1, 2, with Ohtani, he's coming off a second Tommy John surgery, and that certainly complicates matters. There's a rehab process that you need to navigate. He also has not thrown to hitters yet, and so that's another factor. Third, Nestor Cortez, like, yes, he is, sort of risking an injury, but there's no guarantee he will get hurt. Like, he's somewhat healthy right now. I think he's, maybe just as healthy, if not healthier than Gonsolin. Certainly better prepared, in better shape to pitch than Ohtani. And the last thing I'll add, and Daniel, I don't know if you're going to want to add anything on top of this. I apologize. I sort of ran with answering.
No, you're crushing it. You're taking all the words right out of my mouth. So
this is not a decision that Dave Roberts is making. These are organizational decisions. So I just want to look. Dave Roberts has received a lot of criticism, and it has been deserved in the past for something like this. That's not his call.
The only thing I would just add is, like, the investment they made in Shohei Ohtani is night and day compared to like a Nestor Cortez, and you don't want to risk, him maybe never being able to pitch again. Like, for him to throw one inning in the World Series that, like you said, he hasn't pitched, so you don't even know if he's going to be good or bad. I've seen the Nestor Cortez thing going around, and everyone's praising him for it and whatnot, but like, having a guy who's not healthy on the mound in the World Series, like, that sounds like a recipe for disaster to me. Like, so, like, looking at it from the Dodgers perspective, like, if they want to throw Nestor out there, like, go right ahead. Like, like, if he's not healthy and risking his health, chances are he's probably not going to pitch very well. So everything you said, I'm in agreement with.
Yeah, we have a few more super chats, so thank you for these guys. Tabari says, our medical staff needs to be investigated. Yeah, I mean, I know the training staff has taken on a lot of criticism with all the injuries this year, and I don't know if it's the staff specifically as much as it is maybe organizational philosophy to how the Dodgers train, develop pitchers, and then you layer in, like, pitchers just in general get hurt. I know it's not any sort of comfort or solace, but injuries are up across baseball, period. It's not just to the Dodgers specifically, but Andrew Friedman has said, they will do some internal evaluation to figure out what's going on there. Kevin Dodgers Guerra says, no Phillips, we are cooked. I saw Aaron Vaughn asking why you and I are so calm about Phillips not being on the roster. I mean, look, it's unfortunate, and it is a significant loss. I think, as you mentioned, adding Alex Vesia back helps sort of ease that blow. Adding Brusdar Graterol back, even with some of the uncertainty that might be with him not having pitched in a while, helps as well. That doesn't mean, sure, like, if you asked myself, you and I, like, would you guys want Evan Phillips on the Dodgers roster? Of course we would, but it's not a reality right now. And so we're not going to necessarily sit here and full blown panic and say the Yankees are going to run away with the World Series, because I don't necessarily believe that. Does it make it more challenging for the Dodgers to win? Sure. But I don't think, Kevin, I'll disagree, and I think Daniel probably will too, that, not having Evan Phillips doesn't mean that the Dodgers are, as he said, cooked.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. One guy doesn't determine a series. Like you said, you'd love to have Evan Phillips, and he makes the Dodgers better, but there's still plenty of talent on that roster to get this done.
Our last super chat for now is from Richard. It says, now we have two infielders on one leg. Don't get it. And yes, that was going to take us into kind of our final roster addition, being Miguel Rojas. I'm not necessarily surprised that he was added back onto it. I felt that so long as, he got better, if you will, from the time off. And I mean, look, he's not 100%, so we can eliminate that. I did see people saying, if he is 100%, he should be on the roster. He's not 100%. If he's capable of contributing, like, fine. I guess I can see him. I can see why he was added back on. I'm not necessarily surprised. I didn't think, being the kind of veteran player that he is, the important role that he's had in the clubhouse, it didn't shock me. For me, the biggest question I have now is he back on the roster because he's going to be starting at shortstop? Because then at that point, you're removing either Edman or Kike from the lineup, which that I disagree with.
Yeah, no, I'm with you 100% on that. You can't really mess with that mojo, especially, Edmund was the MVP of the last series. Kike's been coming through, all playoffs, and he's done it time and time again in October. Like, those are not two guys you want to take out of the lineup. And I'm with you. Like, I wasn't surprised by it, but I also like agree with this commenter and a lot of the other commenters. Like, I personally, I would have just stuck with what they had, last series. Like, I felt like that everything was working pretty well. Like, even like Kiermaier is the guy who's off the roster, and like it's not like that's a huge loss by any means, but in those late games when you do have a lead and you want to get Freddie Freeman, off his feet, it is nice having a guy like Kiermaier in center field who could, go out and catch anything. And I know like Rojas is kind of the infield equivalent of that, like a defense first guy, but if he's not 100% healthy, like as we saw in the NLDS, like, is he going to be able to make all the plays he would need to make if he is that, late game defensive replacement? So, like, if Miggy Rowe was 100% healthy, like, I don't think it would be a discussion at all. Like, he had a really, really good season for the Dodgers, had a lot of big hits, played great defense, as we all know. But just the fact that, he might be trying to push himself, as we saw in the NLDS, like he said before that he basically wasn't going to be healthy until, the offseason, and he was going to try his best to play through it. And we saw that it did, cost the Dodgers. It didn't cost them their season, but it very well could have. So I definitely, I'm not too happy about that decision. Similar to the Evan Phillips thing, I don't think one guy is going to, determine the outcome of this series. But to me, I would have just left it how it was. And like you said, if somehow Miggy Rowe finds his way into the lineup and that means someone like Kike is not in it, then I definitely think you're going to see a lot more angry people, and rightfully so.
Yeah, and you bring up another point. The other concern I do have is, with Freddie Freeman, because, and this was something I brought up on some of the different shows we've done throughout the week, was if Freeman is limited at all and you do need to move Max Muncy over to first base, that brings Kike into third base. And Andy Pages has improved in center field, but I would, like, if you're doing things for defensive purposes at that point, like Kevin Kiermaier
Yeah.
should be playing there. And obviously with Kiermaier off the roster, that's no longer an option now. Another super chats from Shelly. Sorry, did you want to add something?
Yeah, just real quick. Also, one other thing with that is, as we've seen when a lefty's on the mound, like game 2, when they're throwing Rodon, they've put Pages in the lineup and taken Gavin Lux out, partly because of injury, but also he doesn't hit lefties. So now, is it going to be Miggy Rowe in the lineup against lefties instead of Andy Pages? And if that's the case, I would also disagree with that, just because we've started to see, Andy Pages get going with the bat a little. I know we're all sketched out about him in center field, but he has hit lefties really well. So we'll see it. Like, if Miggy Rowe is just a bench guy, like, not a bad guy to have up in a late pinch hitting type spot. But if he's going to be in the lineups, I think that's where it gets a little dicey.
Yeah, definitely. Super chat from Shelly. Losing Phillips is big, but I feel good about this team. Max is the X factor. Yeah, I mean, I think Shelly, sort of is echoing what you and I are saying. Is Evan Phillips certainly not being in the bullpen is a big loss. The reality is the Dodgers still are plenty talented. I think there's still a way for them to win the World Series. I don't think, not to steal a line from you, no disrespect to Evan Phillips, but I don't necessarily think him not being available means the Dodgers are going to, absolutely get crushed. What do you think about Max Muncy maybe being an X factor for this series?
I mean, look, if he's locked in the way he was last series, then it's hard to deny that. Like, he was putting up great at bats, either walking, getting big hits, and if he stays that locked in, especially when we talk about a compromised Freddie Freeman, like, he's kind of taken on that role as the third star, that lefty bat in the middle of the lineup when Freddie Freeman hasn't really been able to do it. So, yeah, I could get behind Max as the X factor. Like, if he's taking the at bats he did, in the NLCS, he's going to have a huge impact.
Yeah. All right. Let's we can answer some questions now for, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes, maybe, depending on how many you guys have. As a reminder, if you could just start it with the word question in all caps, that helps us pick it out. And if we're running out of time and you want to make sure that we get to yours, then and you are on YouTube, super chat is the way to go. I do want to thank everybody who's joined us for this live show, YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. We're over 1,300 people right now. So we appreciate all of you. If you are on YouTube, please be sure to hit the like button on this video, subscribe to the channel, ring the notification bell. We're gonna have a ton of content coming up. As I mentioned, Dave Roberts is scheduled to speak today. Yoshinobu Yamamoto will as well. Andrew Friedman is, and also Blake, we have him at the stadium credentialed, so he's going to be hopefully getting some of the Fernando Valenzuela stuff, because I'm not sure if that's going to be televised yet. So we'll definitely keep that stuff, keep an eye out for that stuff. And just to sort of reset really quick, if you missed it, since I'll focus on the Dodgers bullpen just because that was the big talking point. The group of relievers they have for the World Series is Anthony Banda, Ryan Brazier, Ben Kasparius, Brusdar Graterol, Brent Honeywell, Daniel Hudson, Landon Knack, Michael Kopech, Blake Trinan, and Alex Vesia. So again, not having Evan Phillips certainly is a loss, but that's still a pretty talented group, I think, safe to say. All right, we have a super chat from Richard, another one. Thank you for this, Richard. Says the Dodgers front office and their computer have eliminated more postseason series than the play on the field. They're overthinking again. I'm not 100% sure. Is the overthinking maybe
Rojas
with the Rojas thing?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. Like I could understand it. Again, like Daniel and I talked through some of the concern, but I don't think this is a matter of computer. If anything, this is valuing Rojas's clubhouse presence.
That's exactly what I was gonna say. I don't think a computer is telling them this. It's more just them having faith in a guy like Miggy Rowe who's had a really good year. But yeah, I don't think it's necessarily a computer decision with this.
Yeah, I did see somebody asking if Nestor Cortez was on the Yankees roster. I hadn't seen it yet, but an alert is out and he is on it. John Birdie is not. Yankees go to 13 pitchers and 13 position players, which Aaron Boone had been saying they would probably do. They were at 14 position players and 12 pitchers in their last series, maybe even in the ALDS as well. I didn't check that. But yeah, Nestor Cortez is active. And as Daniel said, if a team wants to take a risk on an injured pitcher having to, be out in the mound in the club, being on the mound in the World Series, then so be it. All right, let's get to some of these questions. Hawaiian Kira wants to know, better ceremonial first pitch, game 1 or game 2? I feel like this is a little bit of a loaded question and certainly generational. I think Oral being part of game 1 is a big boost. No disrespect to Steve Yeager. I think, though, I'm going to have to lean Ethier and Kemp from the standpoint that I think Dodger Stadium will take to them a little bit more than they will to Hershiser and Yeager in game 1. Yeah,
this is like asking to pick between your favorite kids. Like, impossible to do. We love all these guys. I'm with you though. Like, that's more my generation, Ethier and Kemp, and I agree the stadium will probably go nuts for them. But they're all great choices. Like, every time the Dodgers do this and bring back the legends, it's always great.
Yeah. Let's see. Mike wants to know, would Graterol or Kelly be ready to take over Phillips? So Kelly's not on the roster yet, Mike. If you missed it earlier in the show, Dave Roberts did say that if there is some sort of injury during the World Series, that Joe Kelly then potentially could come into the equation. We did discuss Brusdar Graterol being potentially thrust into some high leverage situations because of Evan Phillips not being available. So yeah, I mean, I think Graterol could end up in that scenario. I think he could also end up opening games. I think he could also end up pitching in the middle innings that maybe aren't as high leverage, so that somebody like, and again, I know it's not a popular name, but Ryan Brazier or Daniel Hudson, who have been around and maybe have a little bit more rhythm, are pushed into the high leverage spots. And I did see, I think, was it Suze was asking what happened to Evan Phillips? Yes, just getting here. What's wrong with Phillips? Not 100% sure, other than he reported having some arm fatigue, and that was why he was limited to just one inning in game 6 of the NLCS. I think in a perfect world, the Dodgers would have gotten 4 or 5 outs from him. But yeah, that's kind of where that stands. Duff Time is asking, any chance Phillips' injury is a bit of gamesmanship where they were hiding him until later in the series? This was Duff Time. I don't know if you're around maybe 15, 20 minutes ago, Daniel, when we discussed this. I guess it's possible, but if you're doing that, MLB needs to approve all sort of injury, not sort of. MLB needs to approve all injury replacements that happen during the playoffs. And so it's not, and I know they've gotten strict with during the regular season as well, but I think this is another layer of that where you're not really going to be able to sneak anybody through. So that's one. Two, the other thing is it's the World Series, right? Like, is this a game that you want to sort of play right now? Probably not. All right, let's see. What else do we have? Aaron Vaughn wants to know why Knack over he says Eduardo, but it's Edgardo Henriquez.
I guess just because you could get some length out of a guy like Knack, where like if a game's out of reach, he could just go kill the last 3 or 4 innings or whatever. But I wouldn't have mind if they went with Enriquez, just because you have other guys who could cover length, whether that be Brent Honeywell, we've seen from him. Ben Kasparius has gone multiple innings, so I don't know if the length was necessary, but I guess it is nice to have someone who could, especially when you're talking about having a bullpen game in Game 4. Like, let's say Game 3 is lopsided in either direction. Like it would be nice to have a guy like Knack just be able to go out and eat those innings and save the rest of the bullpen.
Yeah, and I think the other part of this too is, the unfortunate reality is the Dodgers have one starter that you could say, I know he's capable of getting us, 6 innings type thing. Yamamoto, he could do it, but 5 innings is a safer bet. Walker Buehler, 5 innings, probably a little bit of a safer bet. And so you might end up in a scenario where you need some length in multiple games on top of as Daniel alluded to, the bullpen game that would be coming. We have another super chat, so let's get to this one, and then we'll answer a few more questions after, so make sure you guys get those in. Under the Sea says, I know it's kind of silly, but I wish that Snoop would perform California Love before the game, like how Jay-Z performed for the Yankees in the 2009 World Series. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't have objected to that. I know Ice Cube is performing before Game 2, and there's somebody that's going to be performing in Game 3. I forgot who. I'm pretty sure it's Game 3, but definitely in New York. But yeah, I mean, Snoop Dogg certainly would have been entertaining. Daniel, would you have signed up for that?
Yeah, no doubt. I would say Game 1, they should have the mariachi band there. Like, let's show some love to Fernando.
I'm pretty sure they are going to be. I'm pretty sure they are part of tonight's pregame festivities. So that's a good point. So yeah, in terms of tonight, they probably want to focus more on honoring Fernando Valenzuela. But yeah, that's at least getting Ice Cube, sort of another West Coast legend for Game 2. All right, Christopher says, not joking, Dodgers have the most injured pitchers in MLB history to make the World Series, right? Somebody fact check me. I didn't have time to fact check it, but this sounds right. I mean, I feel like it checks out. Because I don't imagine any team that suffered the amount of injuries the Dodgers did still being good enough to be in this position. So, hey, Christopher, we're going to take your word for it. Sounds right to us. So it checks out, at least for this show's purposes right now. All right. I think we got through the questions. If you guys have any last one here, Chris, off topic, so bear with us if you're here for strictly and only Dodgers baseball. It says, has Daniel always been a Rams fan? We like the same 3 teams, so he's just curious.
No, I haven't. I regret to inform people. I started rooting for the Rams when they moved back to LA. I think that was 2016 or so. Before that, my team was the Chicago Bears, just because I have most of my family's from Chicago and there was no LA, football team to root for. And I'll still root for the Bears as long as they're not playing the Rams. But that definitely all Rams now, and that was a great win for them last night. So hopefully the LA win streak could keep it going. We had the Lakers, on opening night on Tuesday, the Rams last night, and then hopefully the Dodgers keep it going tonight.
Yeah, Rams set the tone, so pressure is on the Dodgers. Pressure's on Jack Flaherty and Bronny James tonight now to lead their respective teams to a win. All right. I think that'll do it for us. We appreciate you guys who joined. I know it's kind of an awkward time if you're at work. Hopefully you weren't caught if you were listening or watching us on the live stream. We want to thank everybody. We got this up to 1,500 on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. If you missed it, Miguel Rojas, Brusdar Graterol, Alex Vesia back on the World Series roster. Sort of expected. Big additions, obviously, with Graterol and Vesia. They're all the more important with the surprising news that Evan Phillips was left off the the World Series roster. We don't have full details yet, other than like we sort of shared. He relayed having some arm fatigue during his last appearance in the NLCS. I imagine we'll get more today from Dave Roberts or Andrew Friedman. So as I mentioned, if you're on YouTube, if you're not on YouTube right now, come to our channel at Dodger Blue 1958. Subscribe, ring the notification bell. You'll be sure to get alerted whenever all the pregame, postgame, player interviews, Dave Roberts, Andrew Friedman, all that good stuff goes up. So once again, that's Daniel. I'm Matthew, and we'll see you next time.